Talion and Rico sat outside for a little while longer, talking amongst each other, finally getting to some more light-hearted topics, as they shared some jokes and some stories. Talion speaking of growing up with his mother, and Rico telling Talion about some of her travels. Rico had apparently been a great deal of places in the human world since she came here, which was apparently about 15 years ago. Talion tried asking some questions that might lead to answers regarding Rico's pupation and why exactly she hasn't done it yet. But the only piece of information that Rico was able to provide was that it had something to do with the food she ate, the demonic energy she was able to feed on. Apparently, if food is scarce, then Eco can put off going into pupation, choosing to remain in a larval state in which the necessity for food is much lower. It's a survival mechanism. So, as long as Rico didn't have a steady supply of food, she simply didn't pupate. There are apparently other things that have to deal with it, but Rico's unsure of what those factors might be. Rico supposed that her lack of steady diet mainly had to do with the number of younger siblings that she had. She was apparently one of the 3 oldest out of all of her mother and father's children, and would tend to allow them to eat before trying to eat herself, which might have something to do with her not pupating yet. She simply allowed them to have more food than she did. He also learned that once Eco do pupate, that their physical appearances can change drastically, not just in terms of physical development. While, yes, after pupation they do emerge as seemingly adult, that status can change drastically, depending on what they pupate into. Apparently, this too has something to do with their diet. For example, several of her siblings pupated in an area where there were a large number of a demon called Gory. Now, Gory are fairly small demons and low level. They often come into conflict with Eco, and should the Eco survive the conflict and be victorious over them, they of course get a fresh demonic energy meal as a reward. During the time that they were passing through one of their territories and came into conflict with them, many of her siblings pupated, becoming adult. But apparently, after pupation, they took on forms that held many similarities to the demons that they were feeding on, who were fairly small in size and stature, only reaching a maximum height of about 5 foot, and that's an extremely tall one. They also seem to pick up other traits from them, like the green skin that they were commonly known for, and the short horns that protrude in rows from their head, usually having about 6 of them. Rico's siblings that pupated during that time took on these characteristics, both the size and the horns, and it was simply a coin flip on whether they got the green skin or not. Rico apparently had many stories about her siblings pupating in different regions and taking on different physical characteristics. For example, there was one territory in which they passed through that was inhabited by a massive demon race named Go-Gen. They were nearly 15 foot tall at full height, and that's fairly average. During the time that they passed through these territories, her siblings that pupated grew extremely large. They didn't have the full 15-foot stature of this race, However, most of them that pupated ended up being somewhere near 8 or even 9 foot tall. So, it's clear that whatever the eco eat sort of becomes them. They take on the physical characteristics of whatever they're feeding on during the time that they go into pupation. Talion, of course, wanted to discuss this more, but it was about this time in the conversation that they saw a figure beginning to emerge from the woods nearby. It was Teacher, Mr. Silas, no doubt, finished with his check of the perimeter. Oh, well, would you look who it is? I thought I told you to stay put, kid, not to wander off. Hey, we haven't gone anywhere, Talion replied. We've just been sitting outside, okay? My mom and my grandmother are having a conversation that I didn't want to be a part of. Oh, well, what kind of conversation would that be? Celeste asked. In the moment, Talion might have been a little flush. It doesn't matter. Is it time to train? He said, standing to his feet. Yeah. Come on, kid. Let's go. I suppose we better get this underway. We're losing daylight. Oh, Weez can't train at night? Rico likes night. It cool. Nice breeze at night. Well, we could, but we also have to sleep. And once again, I don't intend on taking it easier on you. You're going to need your rest. So stop with the questions and follow, he said as he turned away, beginning to walk towards the woods, no doubt heading for the clearing that had been made before. And in no time at all, they found themselves there. As they did, Talion began to take notice of the changes in the environment. There had recently been rain, and it had started to fill up the small craters that scattered about this area, creating small pools of sorts. And despite the intense flame that burnt this entire area, life was beginning to spring back to it, as blades of grass began to push their way through the surface of the ground, sprouting up all around. In no time at all, this would no doubt be a green field. To think that there was once a fairly lush forest in this area. Okay, so day 2. This is going to be all about how well you can retain, kid, the sailor said, looking towards Talion. Now, I don't imagine that Rico's going to have any problems summoning her demonic energy. She doesn't have that much of it, so it's not as if it gets lost in her senses like with you, dulled out by its constant flow. So the one who's really up to question is you, Talion. Yesterday, we managed to create an outflow to let your demonic energy surge to the surface, but that was a completely uncontrolled flow. You couldn't even stop it. The point of it was for you to understand the feeling of that demonic energy flowing to the surface. Now, it's time to figure out whether or not you can hang on to that feeling. Remember, don't go through the same process you did last time, trying to picture that dam. We're not trying to create an outflow. You need to be able to will your demonic energy to the surface. Force it to do what you want it to. For that, you need to concentrate on the feeling. But understand this, kid. This training session isn't going to last all day. I'll give you 1 hour. If you haven't successfully managed to summon any demonic energy in that time frame, then it's clear that you were unable to gain a firm enough grasp of the feeling to call it yourself. In which case, we're going to have to return to the previous day's training. We'll create an outflow, and you'll focus on the sensation. But that'll be another wasted day. Hopefully you were paying close enough attention to get it done this time. So what Rico do? She asked, looking up towards Salus. Well, I have no doubt that you could summon your demonic energy. But we're not going to continue with your training until such time as Taleon has proven he can summon his. I don't want him getting distracted. Okay, Taleon, here's your next step. Force your demonic energy to the surface on your own accord. Once you successfully manage to force your demonic energy to the surface, then you're capable enough to begin training in the use of that demonic energy.